Trent Alexander-Arnold joined Liverpool as a 6-year-old. He captained the club throughout various youth levels and then finally debuted for the first team at age 18. From that moment on, he's managed to establish himself as one of Liverpool and the Premier League's best players, winning basically everything there is to win with the club and gaining iconic status as a world-class, homegrown Liverpudlian talent. Anfield sung his name every game and worshipped him as one of their own. Trent Alexander-Arnold is now leaving Liverpool for free. The club will get no money for him as he's refused to sign a new contract. It's looking increasingly likely he's about to sign for Real Madrid, a club who Liverpool, to put it lightly, haven't got on well with in the last few years. And this has made a lot of people very angry. Loads of fans, largely but not exclusively Liverpool fans, think that Trent has betrayed them, that he owes Liverpool more loyalty than this. But equally, a lot of other people think Trent doesn't owe Liverpool anything. He's done all he had to do for Liverpool and can leave with his head held high. This video is about players like Trent. We ask, just what do players owe fans and clubs? The first question to ask is, why might a club and the fans of the club think that a player owes them something? On the part of clubs, they invest an awful lot into players. If a player transfers for a club, this is a very literal sense of investment in terms of a transfer fee and wages. But even if a player comes up through a youth academy, a considerable amount of time and again wages is spent on that player, not to mention the opportunity costs of turning down other signings in the same position. The club also takes on a decent amount of risk. They risk putting them into the first team and passing up other players, and if the player is a youth product, they risk the investment of coaching, which could be spent obviously on other players. As well as simply investing a lot in these players, the clubs do actually just need these players. They don't want them to leave. Their success is reliant on the player remaining. Consequently, they're within their rights to be pretty pissed off when a player attempts to leave. This is especially the case, as is increasingly true in the modern era, if the player intentionally runs down their contract so that they leave on a free and the club gets nothing. The club needs that money to find a replacement, and crucially, in the era of FFP, it needs that money to make the balance book look good. In light of these reasons, it's no real surprise that clubs think players owe them some sort of loyalty. But clubs are one thing. What about the fans themselves? Why are they so pissed off? Why do they think they're owed something in particular? Well, the main reason is obvious. When a player tries to leave a club, it indicates to the fans that they don't care about the club, or to put it more fairly, that they don't care about the club as much as the fans do, who doubtless, if they were put into the same position, would probably never leave the club and would probably play for free. Understandably, fans take this to heart. It's so different from how they'd react in that situation that it's often difficult to take it as anything other than a dagger to the heart. This is a player they've sung the name of home and away throughout the seasons, throughout many seasons normally, who now in the eyes of fans is spitting on the shirt as they leave. It's understandable then that they think the player owes them some loyalty when they would behave so differently, so loyally if they were put in the same position. And depending on the context, it's possible for this sort of feeling of betrayal, for lack of a better term, to be even worse. Here there are three major ways the context can affect what the fans feel about a player leaving: who that player is, how they're leaving, and who they're leaving to. In respect to how they're leaving, the most egregious version is running down the contract, especially with entirely calculated contract flirtations to ensure they aren't sold beforehand. A case like this is most devastating because it feels like an active attempt to harm the club, because of a lack of a transfer fee. Though in reality, this is largely going to be motivated by the player's financial interest in a large signing-on fee, with the damage to their current club an unfortunate side effect. One step up from running down the contract is pressurizing the club to sell at a transfer fee lower than the club would like, achieved sometimes privately but more often through leaking to media mouthpieces or the nuclear option of publicly throwing one's toys out of their pram. Here there remains a sense of betrayal from fans and a sense that the player couldn't wait to jump ship, and they've done so in a way that wasn't entirely optimal for the club. But the best case scenario is a player going for as big a price as possible and not throwing a strop either publicly or privately in order to get that to happen. In cases such as this, there can still be a sense that the player has still left a hole in the squad, and that's frustrating, but there is a general acceptance that players will leave, and for those of us not supporting the maybe 2 or 3 big clubs that sit at the top of the food chain, an acceptance that the player will see this as a move to a bigger club, even if we privately disagree with that. And additionally, here there's the added bonus of being seen to win the transfer window, an increasingly important thing for fans in the modern era. But back to souring the mood of the fans, and the sense of this player owed us more than what he's given us. Another thing that helps to sour the mood of the fans is who you leave for. Leaving for a rival is an obvious no. Leaving for a competitive rival is also an obvious no. Leaving for a club where any bad blood exists, as is the case between Liverpool and Real Madrid in the current Trent Alexander-Arnold saga, is also unacceptable. One final point to mention is who is leaving. The connection you have with the fans, or at least the connection the fans think they have with you, matters. This is no more apparent than in the case of a hometown youth academy product, again, like the case of Trent Alexander-Arnold. Fans, rightly to an extent I think, believe they have a closer connection to youth products, so when these youth products turn around and say, I don't want to be at this club anymore, it hurts the fans just that little bit more and further contributes to the sense that you owe us more than this. You're from our team, you're one of us, you owe us some loyalty. But away from youth products, these sort of cases can occur in players who the club have just transferred in or signed as a free agent. For example, when a club has stuck with a player through injury or through scandal, there's a sense from the fans that, well, you owe us not to leave in this way, you owe us not to leave maybe full stop. All these reasons I've just mentioned in this section contribute to the feeling of betrayal when a player leaves a club. They all contribute to the sense that a player owes fans more than what they are currently giving them by leaving the club now. Well, what about the case for the defense? Or should I say, defender? It's funny stuff, folks. If you're not liking and subscribing after hilarious stuff like that, then what are you liking and subscribing for? No, but seriously, please like and subscribe. It really helps out. The absolute first thing to say here is that this level of outrage from club and fans is reserved only for players who the club and fans actually want to keep. This might seem an obvious point. Of course fans aren't riled up about players they don't care about leaving, and of course clubs are reasonably happy to let such players go. But the reason it's important for this video is that we're exploring what players owe clubs, and that means all players. When fans, rightly to an extent, point to concepts like loyalty or paying back the club for standing by them during moments of controversy or injury, these arguments are undermined if they are not extended to players who simply aren't as good, as they so often aren't. Just as a player agitating for a move away owes you loyalty, so too does your club and your fan base owe loyalty to the player who came up through your youth system but didn't quite make it as a regular starter, or the guy who saw you through 2 promotions but now can't hack it in the Premier League. The point being, if you want to play the loyalty card, you have to be ready for it to be played back to you. But you know, let's put that on the back burner for now and assume the player is one the fans want to keep in the first place. What does the player owe the fans in this situation, and how can they push back against fan and club pressure? Well, let's think about running down contracts. This is, as I said, I think where fans and clubs are often at their most angry and most likely to say you owe us more than this. Well, to something like this, a player might reasonably say, I just owe you the fulfillment of my contract and nothing more. And at least in one sense, they'd be right. It would be bizarre to expect workers in other fields to refuse other job opportunities that might excite them or pay them more, on the basis of some claim about loyalty. You can't say, no Tesco Express manager, you can't possibly join Sainsbury's Local at the end of your contract because you owe us some loyalty. That just doesn't work, right? But away from this legal and formal response, what could a player say when they're told they owe the club some loyalty? Well, they might push back a bit and point to what they've already done for the club. Of course, this is situational. If a player has done very little for a club, perhaps coming in and having one good season and then immediately trying to leave and use the club as a stepping stone, then this isn't a good response. But on the other end of the spectrum, if a player has done lots for a club, promotions, winning trophies, maybe just being a reliable servant for a number of years, then it seems kind of reasonable for them to say, I've done enough for you, I want to try something else. And in some cases, like in Trent Alexander-Arnold's case, I've done everything for you, I want to try something else. It might not be what a fan of the club would do, but it's not unreasonable for a player to believe that they have delivered all that they have owed to the club. A player might also say, I don't owe you my whole career, nor my life outside of this career. Players are human beings. They may well want to go and experience life in other cities or other countries. Their career is a short one, and at a high level, they have the sort of money that can facilitate moving around or abroad fairly seamlessly. In the vast amount of cases, we should remember that players have no real connection to a club or city, unless they came through the youth academy, and even then, they might support another club or be from another place or country entirely. And even then, maybe they just want to move out of the city they've lived in their whole life. Who can blame them? Other cities are exciting as well. Not only might the player want this, their family might want this. Their family might be from somewhere else. Or they might have people relying on them financially, people who need them to take up this pay packet offered by another job. Because to these other people, and maybe to the player themselves, that's exactly what this is, just a job. My point here is that it's not just about this player and this relationship with this football club and its fans. The players owe things to other people in their life, and people who, with respect to fans, they care about more, their family, their friends, and themselves. So who's right? I think both sides have some pretty compelling arguments here. On one side, you've got legions of fans who are, in some sense, right to expect some loyalty from players they've sung the name of for years, and in many cases stood by during poor form or controversial moments. You also have the club itself, who's invested an awful lot in a player and really need the player, or at least a substantial amount of money to replace the player, especially in the age of FFP. But then pushing back against that on the other side, we've got players who are just doing what their contract requires them to do, like any normal person in any normal job, and players who are just human beings who want to experience new clubs and new cultures in their very short career. Players who have other people in their life who quite reasonably want to say in where they'll live, how they'll bring their children up, what country they'll bring their children up in. Additionally, the players can make the point that they're only being lectured about loyalty because they're any good, and that if they weren't any good, the fans would change their tune on loyalty in a heartbeat. Who is right here? Well, here's a frustrating answer for you. It kind of depends who you are. If you're just a regular person and not a football fan, then I think it would be absurd to think that footballers owe anything more than their contractual obligations to a club. These are just normal workers doing what's best for them and their family, and the idea that they would owe their employer anything more than this seems baffling. But you're not just a regular person. You are a football fan. Well, again, it depends who you're a football fan of. If you're not a fan of the club that the player is leaving, then inevitably you will loudly proclaim that he doesn't owe the club anything, he's moving up, he's joining a bigger club, etc., etc. And sometimes you mean this. But often you're just saying this because you know it'll wind up opposition fans. But most importantly, what should you think a player owes your club if you are a fan of your club? Well, you just get it. You fume when your star player gets poached. You jump on Twitter and Reddit and explain he was never any good anyway and that he's a total Judas. Are you right that your player owes you much, much more? In all honesty, probably not. Players probably don't owe your club anything, even in what I take to be the worst case scenario, when they come up through a youth academy and then leave on a free. They're ultimately just people who feel they've accomplished what they want in one job and want to move on to the next one. Yeah, it might hurt us as fans a little bit, but they've got to do right by themselves and by their family and friends. There's no real rational argument that they owe the fans or the club anything more than trying hard to fulfill their contractual obligations. But before you get too angry at me for saying there's no real rational argument to say they owe you anything significant, well, that's exactly my point. There is no rational argument. But you're a football fan. I'm a football fan. We aren't rational. We hate X club because we played them in the cup 10 years ago and their goalkeeper kept wasting time. We hate Y player because his dad retweeted something abusive about our third choice goalkeeper 3 years ago. We have an opinion on a game between two clubs, neither of which we have any support for, because one club is slightly closer to us geographically than the other, so we have to hate them more. We think the referee has an agenda because he didn't give a yellow card to an opponent 7 years ago for a call that, let's be honest, was a 50-50 tackle. Football fans aren't rational. And football is all the better for it. It's great that we're all entirely irrational, entirely emotional fans. It's great that it's either you're entirely with us or you're entirely against us. This sort of rampant tribalism makes the game better, more passionate, and more exciting. So, to the question of what do players owe us, the answer is an entirely irrational, they owe us everything. As fans, we demand nothing less than their complete loyalty, even though, really deep down, we know that's expecting a little bit too much. But what do you guys think? What do players owe clubs? What specifically should Trent have done in this situation? Which player betrayed your club the worst? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Here's a couple of other videos to check out next. Thanks for watching.